The future of NASCAR is upon us. You know the main story we're going to talk about on this episode of Inside the Lines. My name is Jet. It's of course the reveal of NASCAR's next gen car that will set to hit the track in the 2022 Daytona Speed Week, starting with the Busch Clash on Tuesday of that February. We're going to go over the main points and basically recap everything that took place. We're not going to go over, the entire transcript of what people talked about with Steve Phelps, John Probst, and Steve O'Donnell. We're only going to discuss some of the main features, but we are going to discuss some important stuff of some of the specifications on the car, as well as what the drivers and what the executives of NASCAR have said in terms of what this car is going to bring from a racing product, but also from a business perspective. So we're going to break this episode down into three different ways, because you can really summarize the next gen car in three different comments. Number one, production and cost. Basically, NASCAR brought into this with this new model of the rebirth of stock, obviously with the intention to make the cars look more like the cars on the road. And when it was unveiled, I will admit, it looks amazing. It looks absolutely beautiful. It looks mean, it looks fierce, and it does look more like the cars on the road. Now, the cars itself, in terms of, the specifications, it's a lot wider and shorter in terms of its width and height. The cars, or at least the drivers, are going to be more lower towards the ground. Joe Logano did mention that there is now more of a gap between his head and the roof. And that design of making it wider, as well as the roof, or at least the height of the car smaller, makes the cars look more like a coupe. Again, trying to resemble the cars on the road. And it's also wider to basically help with the new introduction of the 18-inch wheels that will be in store in 2022 with the single lug nut. Another big change in terms of the looks of the car is the hood ducts. Now, the hood ducts, I believe they were first introduced in the 2019 All-Star race. If you look at every single car, look at the Chevy, the Ford, and Toyota, the hood ducts look different. The Chevy has a more, I guess you could say, more traditional, more of the original hood ducts. The Ford is a lot narrower as well as longer, their hood ducts. And the Toyota went with a completely different direction for its hood ducts. But it is nice to see that the cars, they look different, even down to, the hood ducts and, how each manufacturer went about it. Also, another change is the rear of the car. The back of the car looks different from each car. Again, more like the cars on the road. Even down to the little specifications, like even with the Mustang. If you look at the back end of the Mustang car, it's sort of like has like a beveled type of design into it. Again, to make it look like exactly like the ones on the road. A lot of the designs you see on the outside of the car is to make it more like the production cars. It's not exactly like it because of all the safety enhancements that's been implemented into the stock cars to make it more bulky. But again, they took a lot of things from, I believe Toyota took some things from Lexus and from Toyota to implement it into their next gen car. So yeah, that's in terms of the look of the car. Now we're going to go over to the cost of the car. One of the main problems with NASCAR nowadays is that it has an unhealthy business model. In fact, that it's hard for teams to get into the sport, and it's hard for new teams to get up and running. The next gen car has been made to solve a lot of that, to make the sport healthier so that more drivers, or at least more teams, can become competitive. For example, back then, a lot of the cars, or at least a lot of the teams, had to build stuff from the ground up. Now, it's going to be more spec. Like, for example, like what you see in IndyCar, their spec is from Dallara. They basically get a package of the chassis and then they make those adjustments. It's going to be similar to that effect with NASCAR. If you look at the vendor list for the next gen car, all of these things are going to be given from a supplier. So teams are going to have to buy stuff from that supplier in order, basically, and work with what they got. Like you look at some stuff like Dallara, work with the radiator ducts. Technique chassis, work with the front, center, rear, and body mounts. Springs, bumpers, deck lid, hood, doors, fenders, front/rear bumper covers. All of these things are now, instead of, having the teams make them all up, now it's going to be given from a supplier. This is to bring the cost down. And so that, you could see maybe, let's say, instead of, Hendrick, Gibbs, and Penske dominating all the time, which it'll probably still be the case, once in a while you might see an RCR driver, maybe pull out a win. And not like how Austin Dillon did, like an actual RCR car dominate the race, possibly. Or maybe even a front row motorsports car could win outside of Daytona or Talladega. or a Team Trackhouse, or 2311 Racing, or just different teams and different drivers getting in the mix every now and then. Not so that it's everyone's at a level playing field, but every once in a while you might see, you know, an outsider come in and steal the show and have a good shot at winning. Number 2 is safety as well as future. Now, we'll get to the future part in a minute, but the safety enhancements. First of all, number 1, the seat, the center of the car, or at least where the driver's position, has been centered or moved a bit more to the right by about ½ an inch to 1 inch. This is to allow for more space on the side between the side of the car as well as the driver. I believe this stemmed from Ryan Newman's potential crash at Daytona last year. They might have, you know, take that crash and implement it into this car to maybe move the driver a bit away from the side of the door. Another thing, now this is something that they actually took from the production car, was I believe the production cars has a lot more padding or safety enhancements or safety features on the front and rear of the car. They took that and implemented it into the next gen car. Now in terms of future of the car, now we know that the days of the gas guzzling machines of, you know, decades with NASCAR is coming to an end. One way, whether you like it or not, it's going to come to an end. NASCAR will be moving to a more hybrid type of machine, even including some electrification. I believe something to like a curse system in Formula 1. Well, the car has been designed to implement that in the future. There is space to implement that in the future. And if you take a look at this picture here, some of the component improvements added to the next gen car, stuff like upgraded specs to match modern passenger vehicle technology, including independent rear suspension, rack and pinion steering, and larger brakes. And then you see the second statement that says a new transaxle combines the transmission and rear gears into one package with an eye on the future. So those were some of the components in terms of the future, as well as some of the safety components. Not much, but still an improvement from the Gen 6 car. But now let's get on to the third part, the most important part, the actual racing. Now we're gonna first include the part that these cars are now gonna be composite bodies. So this is stemming from the Xfinity cars that they ran, I believe, starting in 2017, 2018. So basically, simply put, the damage that cars deal with, if they hit the wall or make contact with another car, it's not going to be as much of an issue as it was with the current Gen 6 car. Now, what I mean by damage, I mean if you slightly hit the wall, a lot of times if you hit the wall, it could cut down a tire. With the next gen car, it shouldn't be a problem. Or if you make slight contact with another car, it shouldn't affect your performance. In fact, John Probst said this in the press conference. He said that this new car is going to allow them to get in the wall a little bit, get into each other a little bit, without really any worse for the wear as far as the performance of the vehicle. We're really hoping that this encourages them to get a little bit more, even more aggressive, if that's possible. Our drivers are pretty aggressive already, but we think this composite body will really allow them to bump and bang a whole lot more. Now, I want to look at in terms of the spec sheet, because NASCAR released 3 different types of sheets: a spec sheet, a vendor list, and the overall styling and components of the next gen car. Now, there's a whole bunch of numbers and wording that I don't think y'all really care about, but there's 2 that are really important: the spoiler as well as the horsepower. Now, both of them have said TBD, will be based on the track type and size. Now, I've heard from multiple people that have said that the high downforce will be 550 still, and the low downforce will still be actually be 670 instead of 700. I don't really mind that much if it's 670, you know, 700. I don't really care about that. The 550 horsepower, though, I am very concerned on. First of all, 2 things. Number 1, I would have preferred if the next gen car had an unrestricted engine. Now, maybe that will come into play with the hybrid engine. I believe that's going to take place in another 2 or 3 years. But I would like to see an unrestricted engine. I don't care if it's 550 horsepower. I know the days of 900 horsepower, as much as we want them back, they're not going to come back. All right? We just have to get over that. The 550, I don't mind, but it's a tapered spacer or some type of some type of equipment or whatever the case may be that restricts horsepower, I do not like. But mainly the thing I do not want to see is a repeat of what we saw at Kansas, where 8-10 laps into a run, we're still seeing, you know, drivers either going full throttle or blip the throttle. That is something I do not want to see. And by how NASCAR announced this car, because they said it's going to be harder to drive, it's going to be back in the driver's hands, you know, it's basically going to be more difficult to handle. In my mind, I'm thinking, okay, we should not see full throttle racing. All right, we should not see drivers 8 to 10 laps into a mile-and-a-half racetrack still going full throttle or just lift the throttle for about half a second. We shouldn't see that. John Probst also says that the body of the next-gen car is designed to be symmetrical, removing the skew and tail offset from the centerline that teams have used to create right-side downforce, again putting it back into the driver's hands. Bigger tires will have more mechanical grip for them to lean on the tires versus lean on the body, if you will, through aero. The car will also be 2 inches higher off the ground with a new splitter up front, a flat underbody, and a rear diffuser that channels and transitions airflow moving under the car and reduces the effects of more disruptive, quote-unquote, dirty air behind it. Again, this is all sounding really good. One of the big issues with racing nowadays is the over-reliance on side force and the yaw effect. We have to get that down to 0. We have to make so that side force is basically non-existent. Based on Probst, they have fixed that. So now it's more mechanical grip. It's more in the driver's hands. You don't have to rely so much on aero. This is all real good signs. And that's, I think, the main thing that I care about. It's not really just how much horsepower that, a driver has. Yes, we want 900 horsepower. You want a lot of horsepower. That's all good and all. But overall, I just want so that we see that the drivers really have to work hard in order to pass a driver and win a race. And by pass the driver, meaning it's difficult to pass someone because they're just simply better than you based on skill. Not based on, look at Kansas last year, for example, with Joe Logano and Kevin Harvick. Harvick had the faster car, without a doubt. But because Logano was in the lead, Harvick had no shot. All Logano had to do was take his line, and he was golden. That shouldn't be a problem, hopefully, with the next-gen car based on how NASCAR describes the new aerodynamic changes. Another cool feature that NASCAR will be implementing with the next-gen car is the fact that drivers will have a rear-mounted camera. So that basically, if they cannot really get an idea from the mirror, they can simply look down and there will be a camera that shows from the back of the car, which I think is really cool. It also says that there will be more in-car cameras, at least with better connectivity, that will allow for more data with the next-gen car. The next-gen car will feature increased connectivity with in-car cameras expected for every car in the Cup Series field, a boon for broadcast and online partners and ultimately fans. Our goal is to have more cameras and more camera angles than ever, so that we can engage our fans and get them inside the car with their favorite driver. We're working out how to get more data out of the ECU, getting more camera angles, high-definition cameras, 360 cameras, you name it, so that when this thing goes live in 2022, that we're bringing our fans something they haven't seen before, from the car perspective, but also from the broadcast perspective. This is also really cool because I think they might be taking the approach of Formula 1. If you watch a Formula 1 broadcast, there's a camera on every single car on the grid, which is good because let's say if there's an accident that takes place, sometimes, the broadcast might miss it. If you have a camera in the car of everyone on the grid, you have a better idea of what happened. Also really cool to get more information, more data so that you can better engage your fans. I think this is stemming more and more into the possibility of NASCAR looking to a more F1 TV type of approach when they have like a more exclusive streaming service that gives you more information, more camera, more of everything of the races, which I think is really good for NASCAR to engage with their fans. And yeah, I think that's really all we have to discuss. Just to recap, 3 takeaways. Number 1, production costs, make it more look like the cars on the road, and to bring down the costs. Now, maybe in the first 1 or 2 years, price is going to go up. It's going to be more expensive for the next gen car than the Gen 6 car because you're going to be buying stuff off the shelves. It's a lot cheaper to buy something rather than, than make it yourself. Simple as if you go to the grocery store and if you make your own bread, it's going to be a lot cheaper than buying out bread yourself. So maybe at first, it will be expensive, but I think, 2 or 3 years down the line, the next gen car will end up being a lot cheaper than the Gen 6 car. And to overall, again, not to make it so that everyone's at a level field, but so that you can make the competition a lot closer than it is today. The cars to make it more look like the production cars, again, it's shorter, wider, make it more like the coupe, kind of like, the actual Camry, Mustang, and Camaro on the road. The safety enhancements as well as, future potential hybrid/electric components with the sequential gear shift. Remember, that is now 5 instead of 4. It just goes up and down, up and down. That is to allow room for future electrification possibilities. Redesigned chassis on the front and rear bumper to increase safety enhancements. Upgraded car connectivity so that, a camera can be placed in every Cup Series car with more, data and information for fans. And, you know, the actual racing side, you know, the fact that the wheels are now going to be a lot larger, 18-inch wheels, single lug nut. Basically, how you see a pit stop. A lot of people were wondering, how are the single lug nuts going to change how pit stops are? It's not going to change anything, you know, at least at the moment. It's not going to change anything. The thing with the bigger wheels, the 18-inch wheels, it's going to allow for more softer tire compounds. The body is now fully symmetrical, so it's, you know, no reliance on side force, on yaw effect, more focus on mechanical grip, more focus on the drivers, and with the composite bodies, they can beat and bang into each other without risking of cutting a tire or, you know, losing downforce, which could affect the race greatly depending on what track you're at. Yeah, overall, it's a slam dunk in my opinion. Based on what NASCAR, now again, those three things we mentioned, those are what is promised of what we can expect. Will it actually come to fruition? Will, when we go to enter in the 2022 season and see the cars on action, will it actually happen? It's unknown. But we do know that NASCAR, they're going to be doing more tests. They're going to be doing, you know, taking multiple cars on the racetrack at Daytona in August, on October on the Roval, and at Phoenix after the championship race. So they're still testing with other cars on the racetrack. So it should be interesting to see what happens with the future of NASCAR and the next gen car in the coming weeks. But overall, I am happy. I am excited for 2022. I'm still a bit skeptical just because, I don't know, like I don't want to say it sounds too good to be true, but there's so many good things coming out of this next gen car, that what NASCAR is saying, what the drivers are saying, even, you know, I think what Logano said, you know, the cars are harder to drive. There's more of a throaty sound, so it even sounds a lot better, at least in my opinion. There's a lot of good coming out of it. When we actually get to race time in 2022, you know, is it still going to live up to the hype? We'll just have to wait and see. But that is it for this episode of Inside the Lines. Guys, tell me in the comment section down below, what are your positives on the next gen car? What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? Are you excited for it? Are you not? Again, leave all your comments down below. But until next time, my name is Jet. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.